An analysis of the film Precious, based off of the novel Push by Sapphire, presented to you by Alenda, Priscilla, Cozy, and Olivia. Featuring Harlem around the 1980s, the film Precious focuses on the life of Clarice Jones, who goes by Precious. The film depicts her life in an abusive household, showing multiple counts of physical abuse by her mother, as well as other sexually abusive acts by her father, which eventually leave her pregnant with 2 children. To begin, the film opens up with Clarice daydreaming in class as we learn of her crush on her teacher, who she quickly stands up for by slapping the student who responds to him with a cuss word. Clarice is asked to be seen by the principal, which is where the first main plot point begins. The principal asks if Clarice is pregnant again, for the second time at age 16, and Clarice does not deny it. The principal informs Clarice that she can no longer attend that school and is sent home. Throughout the film, Precious is seen being physically abused by her mother, who is essentially only keeping Precious and her daughter Mongo, who has Down syndrome, around as a way to collect welfare checks from the state. The mother makes it very clear that she does not love or care for Precious in the way that she should, and this is best depicted through the violence we see within the home scenes. Precious goes to attend an alternative school per her old principal's suggestion, which is where she learns to make friends, connect with others, learn to read and to write, and that she has more worth in life than the life she's been given. Her teacher, Miss Blue Rain, pushes Precious to not only become educated, but to fight for herself and for her children, because she deserves that much. In addition to Miss Rain, one of the only other positive, mentor-like characters in the film for Precious is Miss Weiss, the social worker who Precious has to meet with in order to collect welfare checks for her mother, because she shows concern for Precious throughout their meetings. When Precious slips and mentions the abuse she's faced in her home, there's an unforgettable look on Miss Weiss's face that shows sadness and anger and confusion all at the same time. Later in the film, the next time we see Miss Weiss is in a sit-down with Precious after she's given birth to her second child, Abdul. Miss Weiss and Precious's mom, who attempts to either deny or excuse the behaviors and actions she's taken against Precious her whole life. This takes place after Precious has given birth to the second child born from being raped from her father. After an escalated physical assault by the mother against Precious, and Precious has run with Abdul to find safety. Precious is finally able to stay with Miss Rain and open up to Miss Weiss about her attacks.
Political economy. Who will tell their stories? African American girls face high rates of abuse. Domestic violence affects the Black community disproportionately. This is more prevalent among African Americans who live with financial insecurities. They experience higher rates of psychological abuse, such as insults and name-calling, than any other race. For Black women, their first response is to stay silent. The Precious movie is based off of the novel called Push by Sapphire. Sapphire wrote this novel for the girls like Precious who she has taught before while working as a remedial reading teacher in Harlem. These girls have nobody to tell their story. These girls are the overweight, unwanted Black women who do not fit into the margins of society's beauty standards. Just like Precious, who was locked out of society through her skin tone, skin color, illiteracy, and by social class, the purpose of Precious is to give hope to girls like her. The movie focuses on the hope of humanity rather than all the horrific things that happened to Precious. This movie portrays the message that there is light at the end of the tunnel, no situation is permanent, and there are people who care.
As Precious is getting sexually assaulted, we see a cat and a shadow in the background. The cat was used to display the sense of normalcy in a typical home. Even though we know nothing about the situation is difficult, this is used as a contrast to the dark events that are going on. Cats are also known to keep to themselves, and the cat running away symbolizes how her mother ignores the assault she faces. The shaking of the camera is then used to reflect the dysfunction of the situation. We also see in the film that there is a shadow of a person behind her, most likely her mother, a very obvious way of representing the fact that her mother watches her suffer and does nothing. Precious imagining herself as a light-skinned girl is an example of the self-hate within her. She somehow believes if she was white, her life would be better or she would be prettier. This concept is feeding into Western standards of beauty and the fact that looking Western is prettier than not. Her wanting a light-skinned boyfriend is a reflection of how she wants better in life. And to her, getting someone who is light-skinned who will love her will show her to have worth as a human being. This mindset she has is obviously due to the idea within our society that somehow being lighter makes you more worthy. Precious is centered around a dark-skinned girl who deals with many family and personal conflicts. One of the main personal conflicts being her hate of her dark skin as a product of colorism. Yet, as you watch the film, you will notice that many of the people who helped Precious were light-skinned, and most of her enemies had a darker skin tone, her mother and her father. The film Precious perpetrates this white savior complex in the action of putting mostly light-skinned people as her beacon of light. This reinforces the idea already instilled in our society that being white is right, better, or more pure or holy. This reinforcement will thus most likely contribute to the audience's conscious idea that somehow having lighter skin makes you a better human. This idea needs to be challenged, and the film Precious should have included more darker skinned people for Precious to look up to and see as a savior.
Audience reception. Increasingly, more black individuals saw this film contrasted to white individuals. Regardless of whether you delighted in the film or not, it contained content that was extremely off-putting for black individuals. For example, mental self-review, racial advancement, ignorance, and assault. With respect to white individuals, they consider Precious to be a terrible portrayal for Hollywood movies in light of profit. Black individuals consider this as an awful representation of themselves in view of the generalizations utilized in this film. For example, an indecent welfare mother and an absentee father. Audience reception continued. Numerous individuals who have watched this movie made them believe that it was the film The Color Purple, once more on account of what the motion picture speaks to. A case of this would be the manner by which, in the two motion pictures, the young lady was explicitly manhandled and impregnated by the father. In both The Color Purple and Precious, we see a black woman and a black girl having to find the strength within themselves to break away from the toxic environment that they were unfortunately placed into. One of the main sources of their self-love also came from characters that had a lighter skin tone than them. In Sally's case, Shug, and in Precious' case, her teacher, social worker, and the male nurse that helps her deliver her baby. Thus, it is understood why the audience felt as though they watched a more modern version of Steven Spielberg's The Color Purple.
The film Precious highlights the realities and issues experienced by Black women in the Black community. Although it can be seen as a negative representation of the Black community, it is important to acknowledge and openly discuss the issues addressed in this film in order to bring social justice to the women experiencing these atrocities. Although the film bravely depicts a difficult lived experience, it still perpetuates some negative ideas that we as a society still adhere to. From her daydreams to the light-skinned characters who elevated Precious's spirits, the idea of a white savior was also elevated. In conclusion, this film provided a very raw and honest representation of issues faced by Black women in the Black community.